Needing no further introduction.
No, he doesn't.
Go ahead.
Don't forget about the first car.
The first car. All right. Damn it.
All right. I'm going to show you how not to do it, Andy. All right. A little bit about myself. You probably know me, of course, by now. Dave Haugen. I've been with this club for maybe 4-ish years, something like that, and I haven't done a classification talk before, so if you're confused about anything I say, stop me, and I'm happy to take questions. I was born in Minneapolis, in a Minneapolis hospital, actually by cesarean section, which, you know, in 1971, I know that explains it. In 1971, that wasn't the standard that it is today. You know, that was kind of a big deal. So that's interesting. I was an OPS baby. My parents had already adopted 2 children by then, thinking they couldn't have children. They adopted Peter in 1967 and my sister Beth in 1969. So I was a very fat baby. The doctor said I ate way too much. So there you go. My father, Roger, was a dairy farmer from Sunburg, Minnesota. Anyone know where Sunburg is? Anyone? There you go. There you go, Jerry. It's a kind of New London Spicer, Kirkhoven, you know, areas like that.
Don't forget
Murdoch, Benson. He didn't care for dairy farming too much. He wanted to play sports, but Grandpa Willie said, that's fine, you can play sports, but chores start at 5. So that wasn't possible. As a dad's first active rebellion, he got a job filling silos at, he likes to say 4 in the morning, but the sun's not up then. Filling silos, and bought his first car, and he always bragged that his father didn't think he could do it, so he was very proud of that. He never lets me forget that. My mother was a preacher's daughter from Sioux City, Iowa. She became a music teacher and supported Dad when he went to college at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, which ironically is where I ended up going, not really even occurring to me that that's where he went, so that was kind of interesting. After he got his business degree, Dad and Mom returned to the farm in Sunburg to give dairy farming one more try. And after one night when the cows got out and were roaming loose, and my very prim and proper mother was asked to chase down a few heifers, a new plan was formed to do something completely different. The first 3 years we lived in Hastings after I was born, where Dad had found a banking job that he liked, and Mom stayed at home to take care of the kids. My most vivid memory of Hastings, and I really don't have many, the 4 of us all got the flu on Halloween, and we still managed to go trick-or-treating. None of us had candy. We piled the costumes and all went to bed, so that was my experience with Hastings, Minnesota. The next 2 years we lived in Faribault. The only thing I remember about Faribault was there was a mouse in the dishwasher. I don't know why I remember that. Yeah, it was alive. 1976, Roger bought into a tiny, tiny bank, about $7 million in assets, called Santiago State Bank. Everyone knows where Santiago is. Where we actually lived for a few months in a foreclosed home. Now, you have to understand, in 1976, you know, foreclosure, that was a scandal. And, you know, living in a foreclosure was kind of interesting, being that we were new to the area. My most vivid memory of living in the outskirts of Becker was Grandpa Willie backing his car into the basement window on Christmas Eve. I had never heard my grandmother yell before, but she yelled. That spring we moved into the house I would grow up into on 8th Avenue Southeast in St. Cloud, right by Riverside Park, which, if you know anything about St. Cloud, the Southeast side was a really fun area to grow up in the 70s and 80s. It had the Riverside Park, had the sliding hill, the wading pool, cross-country skiing. I mean, it still has a lot of amenities now, so probably more. Being a music teacher, my mom tried to teach me piano at a young age. Never took. I just, you know, I am not a big piano player. I did attend Lincoln Elementary, which is interesting because we did Warm Hands, Warm Hearts there 2 years ago. And walking up and down the halls where I went to school was just really interesting. Often when you walked home, you stopped by Norb's grocery store. Anyone remember Norb's? And got candy there for a nickel, played video games. Building's still there. I went grades 3 through 6 at Jefferson, which is now the St. Cloud Christian School. Right, Isaac? Right on. In 6th grade, I pretty much got suspended because we went on a cross-country skiing trip, and I took the big trail because, of course, I was an experienced skier living by Riverside, and the whole class was waiting for me as I got lost. My teacher was so hard on me, I pretty much cried the whole way home on the bus ride, and he felt bad and called my house later to see how I was doing. I started confirmation classes at Bethlehem Lutheran, where Glenn Mittoon was the lead pastor. And a little story about Glenn. You didn't know I was going to bring you up, Glenn. Glenn was the stricter of the two pastors at the time. And at the Bible camp, he was running the cabin that was going to get some sleep. And he announced that, and he looked straight at me. You don't remember this, Glenn. But he looked straight at me and he said, "Everyone who wants to get some sleep, come into my cabin." And of course, I was too dumb to follow you, Glenn. So I had a miserable time getting no sleep. But that was fun. My weekend recreation consisted of revisiting Sunberg doing chores. The only fun I had there was riding an Indian mini bike, which eventually my uncle sold for $50. Now, anyone who's watched American Pickers knows that Indian motorbikes are worth a lot of money. It's probably worth thousands of dollars today, so I often think about what could have been. I also learned to drive at my grandmother's. We drove around the house many, many times. That was kind of our training ground, but I did end up failing my first driver's test, so I guess testing at grandma's was not effective.
Too many circles.
Too many circles. It was all left turns.
Yeah.
Grades 7 through 12, I attended Tech High School, where I met my future wife, Tiffany. Met her in junior high orchestra. She was an 8th grader sitting in front of me on the music stand, and she was the only one that would laugh at my jokes. And you know, if you find someone that'll laugh at your jokes, you know, you've got to keep her. So that was fun. Went on our first date when I was 14 and she was 15. It was kind of a scandal. I lied to my mom and told her I was going with a guy friend. And we met at the old Crossroads Cinema that's not there anymore and saw a movie called Moving Violations. Yeah, so if that's any indication of anything. Let's see. My first job was as a bagger at Byerly's. I worked for Will Bakke. Anyone remember Will Bakke? He was my first boss. And then I was a pricer at Shopko for a gal named Mary Viersba. My sister Beth, to describe my relationship with her as adversarial would probably be an understatement. In the morning, when we were both teenagers and wanted to look pretty for our boyfriends and girlfriends, she bit me to get in the shower first. I yelled up to Mom and I said, "Mom, she bit me in the shoulder." And she said, "Let your sister in the shower." So moms and daughters stick together apparently on that front. Sports was not my strong suit, violin was. There's a little, I had an advantage because Peter played violin in high school, my brother, so of course you want to do what your brother does and learn to play violin, listening to him. I studied under Bill Wick, who played his violin at the Blue Heron, if anyone remembers Bill playing at the Blue Heron many years ago. And then studied under Marion Judish. Going to school, I considered Carleton College, but they had no orchestra, so I ended up going to the U of M. Dad sighed a financial sigh of relief because Carleton, as you know, is extremely expensive. The U of M was real interesting. You know, is the first time I'd really been outside of St. Cloud. You have to understand, you know, St. Cloud many years ago, there was not a lot of diversity. So when I went down to the U of M campus, I was finally the minority. And I lived in the Riverside Plaza apartments where literally that week someone was shot, and another person was robbed. And, you know, I was very naive. I'll tell a quick inappropriate story. So I got a knock on the door, and there's two gals standing there in the apartment building. They had this pink phone. And they said, "We're selling pink phones for $60. It was this cheap pink phone. Why would I want to buy a cheap pink phone for $60? And so eventually they left, and it wasn't for a year or two later that I understood that I was getting propositioned, and I didn't understand. So, it didn't occur to me, literally. In 1991, when I was living down there, the Twins won the World Series. Where's Dave Tripp? There you go, brother. And there honestly was not a better place to be than a couple blocks away from the Metrodome. They were banging pots and throwing toilet paper into the square there where I lived. It was an amazing time. So 1991 was also the Halloween blizzard. if anyone remembers that. And I was so positive that I was going to miss my test, and they had never shut down the U of M, until years prior. So I walked in 2 feet of snow to make sure that my midterm was canceled. So that was just kind of silly. I pulled on a locked door and then walked home. I used to play in a rock band. We played at the Rocks in the red carpet. Where's John Baudet? Talk about getting to know people. Yeah, it's too much information probably, but I eventually got into Carlson School of Management while Tiffany was going to St. Catherine's in St. Paul, so that was good. A good location. We got married in 1994. We've been married 17 years. So while I was writing my outline, I figured out I have known my wife for 27 of my 40 years on this planet. So again, that's pretty cool. My first job was in the Crystal Court in Minneapolis, working for a bank called Bank First. And I quit 3 days later. I didn't have a liking for working downtown Minneapolis. My family hired me. They figured out I was applying for a lot of jobs that weren't banking related. And I think it occurred to them, we just paid for this kid's education. Doesn't look like he's going into banking. We better hire him at the bank. So that's why I started at the bank. We got married in 1994, also at Bethlehem Lutheran, and had a reception at the Country Club, Raleigh. Right on. All right. One thing I found is that the secret to career success is doing the job no one wants to do. And at that time, it was compliance. Compliance in banking was a yawner, kind of like my speech. No, I'm just kidding. Essentially, I got in being the compliance officer in 1997. And soon after that, I started cleaning the bank, and no one wanted to clean the bank. And it turns out cleaning a bank is more profitable than being an officer at a bank, so that was kind of interesting. At this time, we started the Various String Quartet. We succeeded in spite of ourselves. It's interesting, we play with Bev and Steve Ekblad, and they were our teachers in high school. And so years and years later, for us to get together and join a string quartet, that we still play together to this day is just kind of a really fun thing, really unique. We first lived in St. Cloud 4 years, then in Clear Lake 4 years. Now we've been back in St. Cloud 9 years. Tiffy worked at the hospital, so thanks Dan and John, wherever you guys are, for employing my wife for a while. At this time we didn't have kids. Tiffy came from a family of 10 and said that she'd already raised her kids because she was third oldest, and many children to come after that. We got to the age where it was now or never. Thankfully, we chose now, and we have a beautiful daughter who was born in 2005. She, ironically, is 75 percentile for height, so I'm looking forward to that. Be taller than Dad. Come on, you can do it. Over the last 14 years, worked my way up to being a commercial lender and eventually CEO of Sherburne State Bank. My brother had the title of president. Oftentimes only name only because we still had to ask Dad, was this loan okay? So that was kind of fun. This year with Dad being 76 and banking really not being all that much fun, the Haugen sold the bank stock in June to the same holding company that has Century Bank. And so now I have a very respectable, fair boss that I'm happy to work for, so that's really fun. A few days before the bank closing, literally a few days before, that's when Clear Lake got robbed. And you always say in your meetings when you talk about security, it's not if you're going to get robbed, it's when. And I would say those words kind of, tongue-in-cheek because it never happened, but it is very traumatic, but no one got hurt, so that was a really kind of a blessing. Currently, I'm retained as a vice president at Sherburne State Bank. Greg Reinhardt is the boss on site, and he has the CEO spot, rightfully so. My parents are happily retired, living in Becker. My sister owns a graphic design company called Fuzzy Duck Designs in Wayzata, and my brother is living in Maple Grove. I still play violin in the string quartet, currently co-president of the St. Cloud Symphony Orchestra, along with Jane Schulzenberg, if anyone knows Jane. And I play first violin, and we're looking for our next great conductor, as if anyone remembers, Andrew Altenbach came and talked to the Rotary a couple of years ago and had a good time with him. He moved off to Boston and lost him to a prestigious Boston opera group, so that was pretty cool. My wife is thinking about working again now that Monique is attending St. Catherine Drexel. She loves every minute of it, but she got left in the bathroom on the first day of school, and then the third day of school she got locked into the outside play area, so we're working through some scar tissue on those topics. I've been a Rotarian since 2002. I started in Princeton where Bob Trier, who works for Princeton Insurance, invited me. I was president of Rotary in Princeton from 2006 to 2007. And even though that club isn't as active as it is here today, I have the ultimate respect for Jim and Dave and all the past presidents. I know how much work it is. We only had a budget of $11,000, but still, it was quite a lot of work. I didn't know the fix was in when I applied for membership. I didn't know my fellow classmate, Justin Wampak, was on the membership committee, and Justin really had no choice but to approve me. Yay, Justin. And I enjoy being part of the club and the things we do. So, thank you.